All right. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Like we said earlier, we're on the last page of our little packet here. So we're gonna go ahead and jump right on into it. So if you look on the top, it's talking about a thing called the furtive patah. So what is a furtive patah? It is a little mark that when we have a particular rule in place, it's going to change the sound or the way that we do things. Because normally, like it says here, normally to sound out a syllable in Hebrew, we first pronounce the letter or the consonant sound, and then we add the vowel sound afterward. So here we have the letter Lamed, and it's got a patach underneath it, right? So when we see that, we know to pronounce it as consonant sound, vowel sound, right? So la, consonant sound, vowel sound, la, okay? We don't pronounce it as al, we pronounce it as la, okay? So there is an exception to the rule, all right? So when the word ends with the letter het, okay, or the letter ayin, or with a he that has a dot inside of it. Remember we talked about that, I guess it was last week. We talked about the mapik, right? So we had the letter hey, and if it has a dot in it at the end of a word. And it has a patach, or the little straight line underneath it, has that patach vowel point. Then what you're going to do is you're going to flip it. So instead of doing consonant sound, vowel sound, you'll do the vowel sound, then the consonant sound. Okay. So taking a look at this word right here in the center of your screen, how would we pronounce this word? Well, we have the letter resh, so we know we have an R sound. And then it's being followed by a wa pointed shuruk. So we know that that's going to give us the sound ru, right? The resh and then the wa pointed shuruk, ru. But then we have the letter het at the end of the word, and there's a patach underneath it. So since this is a het and it's at the end of a word and it has patach underneath it, all right, instead of pronouncing it consonant vowel, so so it would make a ha sound, we're going to flip that. This is a furtive patach. We're going to flip it because it's following these rules. So we're going to pronounce the vowel sound and then the consonant sound. So we end up with ach, right? So what is the word here? We have ru ach. Normally we may see that and we would think ruha, right? But since this is a het and it's pointed with patach and it's at the end of the word, right? So since that's the case, we're going to pronounce it ruach. It's up above from there, sis. Okay, keep going up. Keep going up. All right, so that right there, that's where we're at. That's see. So you have a resh, all right, followed by a wa pointed shuruk, ru, and then you have the het with this patach. Since it's at the end of a word, it's a het, it's a patach, we're going to flip them. So that instead of being rucha is now pronounced ruach. Okay, that's what the furtive patach does. And it's just that one particular mark. Okay. So if you see it with a kamatz under there, you're still going to pronounce it the normal way, consonant and then vowel sound. Okay. So that word would be pronounced ruach. That's why I was trying to help you find your place on the page. It's hard sometimes to see where it is. All right, so we've got some more words down here that are going to use the furtive patach. So we've got some example words. Okay, there's 4 of them. So let's start over here and let's look at this, the one all the way to the right, because remember Hebrew, we read right to left, right? So let's see. We have the letter Hey, and it's pointed with patach. It's at the beginning. So what sound is that? Ha. Then we have the letter Mem, and it's pointed kamatz. But look what else it has. It has dagesh, right? So what does that mean? What do we do? What's the first thing? So the first thing we do is ask ourselves, is that a baged kafat letter? Mem is not. So we're going to put like 2 M's there, right? So the first syllable, instead of just being ha, is going to be hum. Like hum sandwich, all right? Hum. Then we pick up the second mem and the kamatz. So how would we pronounce that? All right, hama. All right, hama. Then what letter do we have? We have the letter sheen, right? Indicators on the right-hand side, and it's being pointed as kirik yod. So what sound does that give us? She. Okay. So we have hamashi. And then look what we have. What's this letter we have back here? That is the letter het. And it is pointed with what? It's pointed with patach. So since it's at the end of a word, right? It's a furtive patach. So we're going to flip them. So instead of that making the sound cha, what sound does it make? Ah, right. So we have Hamashiach, the Messiah. All right, Hamashiach. All right, so let's move to our next word here. What's the first letter we have? That's the letter sin, right? Because the indicator's on the left-hand side. All right. So what is this letter, or what's this mark underneath it? Kamatz, right? So how do we pronounce that? Sa. Now, what's our next letter that we have? That's a tet, and it's pointed how? That's seresis. Shva would be up and down. This one is horizontal, right? It's 2 dots. Yeah, that's true. Fair enough. It's 2 dots, but instead of them being vertical, they're horizontal. So that is sere, long duration E type vowel. So how do we pronounce that? Te. Okay. So we have sha, te. Then what do we have? We have the letter het, and it's pointed how? With patach. It's the letter het. It's at the end of a word. It's using the patach. So we're going to, instead of it being pronounced as cha, we're going to flip it, and it's going to be pronounced how? Ah. All right. So shateach. All right. No, that's shiitake. Honestly, I forget. Let me get back to you on that one. All right. So what about our next word here? Okay, so we have another sin, and it's pointed kamatz. So we have sa. And then we have what? A resh followed by wa pointed shuruk. So what sound is that? Ru. And then what's the last letter we have there? It's ayin, right? And it's a silent letter. But we have this furtive patach attached to the end of it. All right. So how are we going to pronounce it? Ah. Okay. So sarua. Okay. All right. So the next word we have the letter mem here, and it's pointed how? It's pointed kamatz. So what sound does that give us? Ma. Then we have the letter Nun, and it's pointed how? Hold on, wa, right? Now, yes, this is over the dot over the top. The holem is over a little further left than I normally put it, okay? But so what's our sound there? No. Okay? So we have ma, no. And then what's the last letter we have? The letter chet. It's got a patach. So it's a chet. It's at the end of a word, and it has patach. So how do we pronounce that? Ah. So that gives us Manoach, who is whose daddy? Huh? Manoach. Yeah. Same person. Or that was Samson's father, wasn't it? Yeah. Samson. Yeah, I'm sorry. So Manoach, Samson's daddy, right? All right. So remember, let's look for those three things. So what's the first thing we're going to look for to see if it's furtive patah? What letter is it, first of all? If it's a chet, ayin, or if it is hey with a dagesh inside, a peak, right? If it's one of those three, what's rule number 2? The one you said before. If it's at the end of a word, right? And then the last thing that we look at is it carrying a patach, right? Because you can't have furtive patach without patach. That's seems kind of backwards, doesn't it? Yeah.
Okay, the question I wanted to ask is, on the furtive talk, when you have it under an ayin, there's nothing to flip around. How do you?
You just like I said, no, there isn't anything to flip around because it's a silent letter.
Right.
Okay?
That's why I was confused about it. Why isn't just?
Well, just like I said, just know that you're going to pronounce it as ah. Okay. Just ah, not ah, ah. Okay. Yeah, just like as if it was normal. But it does extend to, and the only thing I could tell you there is there's a possibility that there could be some dialectical differences in the pronunciation of that letter, given other, other letters in front of it or its placement or whatever. So if you have the ayin at the end of a word, right, and it's got furtive patach, I'm just going to pronounce it as ah, short a, right? Ah. Okay, let me move on. We're going to talk about diphthongs. Yay! All right. All right. So, what is a diphthong? A diphthong, okay, is a cluster or combination of vowels, right? A cluster or a combination of vowels that act as a unit and produce a unique sound. Okay. From the point of view of word division, a diphthong represents a distinct syllable in the Hebrew language. So we see one an awful lot, and that's the consonant followed by what? Yud wa. And we know that one is pronounced av, right? Whatever the consonant sound, you just stick it in front of it. So the first one that you have, the first diphthong that you have is a letter, right? That is carrying patach and followed by a yud. Okay. So that has a sound much like the AI in the word aisle. Okay. You go down the grocery aisle, right? Or you go down the frozen food aisle. Okay. So it has a sound like the I. Okay. So the transliteration here is AI. And the class, okay? So what type of it's long. But they are pretty much. Yeah. They're all long. All right. So you have I. Okay. So the very next diphthong that we see is a consonant sound, but it has kamats with a yud. So that gives us that I sound as well. All right. I. All right. I, as in aisle. Okay. Now, here we go. We come to another letter that is carrying patach, but then it also has a yud following, and that yud has a kirik underneath it. So what we end up there is kind of like the sound ayi, like you stepped on a Lego. Ayi. All right. So ayi. So the transliteration for that would be like A-I-Y. Okay. Ayi. So then the very next diphthong that we have is a consonant sound followed by wa. Okay. It's a cholem wa and then a yud. So the translation there, or the sound is oyi. Oyi. I know it's they're not easy, sis. There's going to be some there. Like I said, you have to learn to recognize them on sight. Okay. Oyi. And that's kind of like O-I. Okay. So it's like the O-I in the word oil. And then, yeah, it's like the O-I in the word oil. And then yi attached to it, right? So oyi. Oyi. So then the next one we have, number 5, is a consonant sound followed by a wa pointed shuruk with a yud following it. So where's the first part of our sound? It's coming from the wa pointed shuruk. Ooh. And then the yud on the end, yi, uyi. Okay. Uyi. But of course, like I said, we're going to have a, do what? Uyi. All right. Uyi. So then we also have here, we've got, here's the one with the kamats and then the yud wa. And we know that that's going to be sounded as av, right? As in the word lava, right? Of. Let me bring these up just a little bit. Keep walking in front of the screen over there. All right, so let's take a look. Let's take a look at these. Now, these guys don't have any points on them. Okay? They don't have any points on them. So let's go through what possible sounds they can make. No. Not at all. So we have the letter, let's take the first one. We have the letter Gimel, right? And then we have a Wa and a Yud. Okay. So what possible sounds can that one make? It can make gooey. And what else can it make? Goy. Mm-hmm. See, so you don't always need, if it's this wa yud, it's going to make one of two sounds, right? So it's either goyi or gooyi, right? So it's going to make one of those two sounds. What about this next one? Okay, so it could be mime, like the guys who wear the white paint on their face. All right. What about the next one? All right. So we have a hey, and it's pointed how? Wa with yud behind it. So it can make either the sound hoyi or hui. That's a bunch of hui. Okay, but it's all about learning to see the marks, knowing that those sound, that they're there. All right. So does that make sense? The diphthongs are difficult. They are. That's why I called it the dreaded diphthong. They're difficult. And it takes some time to get used to them. Okay. But you see what they are. You see what sounds they make. You see how to transliterate them. And you know that they're all long. So there you go. All right. So now that we understand that, or at least that's what everybody told me. Well, that's what everybody told me. I mean, if we have questions, then we need to ask them. But what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and move on. We're going to do a sentence now. Okay. We're not going to hurry it up. We're going to take our time. All right. So we're going to transliterate this following line of scripture. Okay. So can everybody see it? Okay. So here is our first word. We have aleph, silent letter, and it's pointed how? Patach. So we have ah. But then what's this next letter we have? That's a tet. No, that's tav, y'all. That's tav. Tav, y'all got me all. All right. So that's tav. And it's got a dot inside. So what are we going to ask ourselves? Is it a beged kafat letter? And yes, it is. And not but and. And it is following another vowel point. So in this case, it would have changed its sound, but it doesn't do that anymore. But since we're following another vowel point, we're going to double that, right? So what does the first syllable goes from being to what? At. Then we pick up the second tav and the vowel point, which in this case is actually kamatz hey. So that gives us what sound? Ta. So the word is ata. Okay? Ata. So now we have the letter hey here. And it's followed by a wa, pointed shuruk, with aleph behind it. Now, aleph is what kind of a letter? A silent letter. So all it's going to do is kind of elongate the sound a little bit, right? So how would we pronounce this second word? Who. Okay. So we have ata hu. All right. Let's move to the third one here. We have a hey, pointed patah. So how do we pronounce that? Ha. Then we have the letter mem, and it has dagesh inside. Is that a beged kafat letter? No. But, so since it's not a beged kafat letter, we are going to double it, right? So the first syllable now becomes what? Ham. Then we pick up the second mem and the kamats, ma. So we have hamma. Then we have what letter here? Shin. Indicator is over the right-hand side, right? So we know it's SH. And then it's pointed how? Kirik yod. So that gives us what sound? She. So we have hamashi. And then we have the letter het at the end of a word with a patach underneath it. So what are we going to do with it? We're going to flip it. And instead of going consonant vowel, we're going to go vowel consonant. In this case, which is what sound? Ach, right? So hamashiach. So we have atahu hamashiach. Now we have the letter bait. And it's pointed how? Segol, right? Short duration E-type vowel. And then that's followed by what letter? Nun sofit. We know it's sofit because it's dangling down below the line, right? So what is that word? Ben, right? Ben. And we see that there's a hyphen there, right? So that hyphen is doing what? Yeah, that's a good way to put it. We are kind of going to mush them together, right? But what it's doing is it's showing us that the first letter the first word modifies the second. Okay, so ben, and then what's our second word? We have aleph here with what? Chatef segol, right? How do we pronounce that? Just quick. Then we have lamed pointed cholem, lo. Then we have a hey pointed kirik yod with mem sofit, him. So we have ben Elohim. And then what's our next word? We have the letter het. And how is it pointed? With patach. Okay? Ha. But we have two yuds here now. And one of those yuds has a dagesh. And it's also pointed how? Kirik yod. So what are we going to do? How do we start with this? Is yud a beged kafat letter? No. So we know without a shadow of a doubt that we're going to double this letter, right? So the first syllable, all right? So the first syllable goes from being what? Cha to what? Chai, because of our diphthong, right? So that patah with the yud, right? That lets us know that we're dealing with a diphthong here. So it becomes chai. All right? So we know we've got dagesh though. So we're going to pick up the second I sound, which in this case is going to be, how would we transliterate it? As a Y, because we have to open up the syllable with a consonant sound. And then we have kirik yod with mem sofit behind it. So we pronounce this second as yim. You got that, sis? Okay, cool. So the word is chayim. Chayim. So let's read our sentence. We have Ata hu hamashiach ben Elohim chayim. All right, let's do it one more time. Ata hu hamashiach ben Elohim chayim. All right, so the word ata means you or you are. Okay? You or you are. Who? What does who mean? He or him, either one. All right, so we have you are he, right? What about Hamashiach? The Messiah, right? The Mashiach, Messiah, right? You are he, the Messiah. What about the word ben? Son. And then we have this, keref, right? We have this hyphen here, right? So we have ben, son. What's our next word? Elohim. So son of Elohim. And then we have the word chayim, which means what? Living. Okay. So what is this saying, right? We should all know this right here. It says, you are he, the Messiah, son of the Elohim that lives. Okay. Son of the living Elohim. Okay. We would change, of course, we would have to change it a little bit to fit our grammar. However, that is that's a pretty good sentence right there. And so with that, what I would like to say is congratulations, because if you've never done it before, you have just transliterated your very first Hebrew sentence. Okay. And of course, I chose something that everybody could understand. We all know, because when Moshiach was talking to his disciples, he said, who do you say that I am? Right? And what did they tell him? They said, you are the Messiah, the son of the living Elohim. So that's exactly what we have right here. Atahu, you are him. Right? And what did Philip call him? Right? When he went to go get Nathanael, he said, we found him. The one that Moses spoke about, we found him. And old Nathanael, you can't fault him. He's like, can anything good come out of Nazareth? He's like, come on, guys, really? But that's just kind of more of that superiority kind of complex that you see very common in the scriptures. So, like I said, we have some context. We know who's doing the talking. We know what's being said, and we know who they're talking about, right? So he's telling them, you are him, the Messiah, the son of the living Elohim. So anyway, that I know that the lesson was kind of short today, but like I said, this was kind of going to be the ending of it. And I wanted to make sure that we did talk about furtive patach, because that can trip you up. It trips a lot of people up. And we did get to talk about diphthongs. Those are a serious pain. Okay, those guys are a pain. They're kind of a pain. But if you know what to look for, then they become less of a problem. All right. And then, of course, we wanted to go ahead and transliterate a sentence so we could see all of these things in action. We saw vowel points in action. We saw dagesh in action, right? We saw beged kafat letters. We saw non-beged kafat. We see sofit letters, right? We have this nun. We have this mem, that mem. So we see sofit letters. We see diphthongs in play. So we see a lot of grammatical tools in this one sentence alone. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for being here. Next week, Yahweh willing, we will start back on our normal teachings, our normal lessons. Also, just to let everybody know, do not forget, tonight, you're going to swap your clocks ahead, right? We got to jump forward an hour. Much as we all hate to do it, we got to jump forward an hour. So that means next week, we will meet at 7 p.m. Central, right? And I still think we'll meet at 2 p.m. Central on Shabbat day. But for Erev Shabbat, we're going to meet at 7 p.m. So anyway, congratulations. Did a great job. Thank you for tailing along for this refresher class. And